She said she married me for love, but I wasn't the only man she called husband. The truth didn't just ruin our marriage, it cost lives. Hers included. To my incredible subscribers, thank you. If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. It helps us bring you more raw, emotional stories inspired by real-life truths. My name is David Collins, and I'm a 41-year-old auto mechanic from Cannon City, Colorado. Most of my life has been quiet, almost forgettable. Small-town routines, a two-car garage I inherited from my dad, Sunday BBQs, and the belief that love meant forever. I believed in that sort of thing. That was before Claire. She was unlike anyone I'd ever met. I first saw her at a tire shop just off Highway 50. Her sedan had a busted front end, and she was pacing near the hood, sunglasses on, talking on the phone. She looked too polished for our town, like someone who'd taken a wrong turn trying to escape something behind her. And maybe she had. When I offered to tow her car back to my shop for free, she looked at me like I'd handed her a miracle. "You're too kind," she'd said, touching my arm with a smile that could disarm anyone. She never did get that car fixed. It sat behind the shop for weeks. By the time I realized it was never about the car, she was already showing up with coffee every morning and kissing me in the garage while grease still covered my hands. I thought I was falling for a strong, independent woman who'd simply had a rough past. Claire didn't talk much about where she came from, and I didn't press. She told me she'd lived in a few states, said she had an overbearing ex she wanted nothing to do with. She talked about wanting to start fresh. And me? I was a sucker for second chances. We dated for just over a year before I proposed. I bought her a ring that nearly drained my savings, white gold, with a tiny emerald stone she loved. We got married in a chapel on a hill that overlooked the valley. She wore pale blue instead of white. She said white was too dishonest. Funny how that makes sense now. Everyone thought we were perfect, the mechanic and the mysterious beauty. She picked up shifts at a boutique downtown. Sometimes she'd take trips to Denver, claiming it was for business meetings or to help her cousin who had health issues. I trusted her. We didn't argue much, and she was always affectionate. But there were signs. Claire never liked me checking the mail. If I ever touched her phone, even just to hand it to her, she'd snatch it like it was a ticking bomb. There were long phone calls on the porch, soft giggles behind the closed bathroom door. Once, I walked into the room and caught her hastily deleting something from her phone. Still, I said nothing. Maybe I didn't want to believe it. Maybe I was afraid to ruin the fantasy. Then there were the times she'd disappear for a weekend, always with a reason. My cousin needs me. The boutique's owner is taking us out of town. I chalked it up to independence. She'd always come back smiling, a little tired but full of affection. One time, she returned wearing a necklace I hadn't bought her. I asked, "Where'd you get that?" She smiled, kissed my cheek, and said, "It was a gift from the boutique owner. For helping out." I believed her, because I wanted to. We'd been married for 3 years when I stumbled across the envelope. It was a regular Wednesday afternoon. Claire had run out for groceries. I was cleaning out the junk drawer in our bedroom, the one she always told me not to touch. Inside were old receipts, a few tangled earrings, and a thick, crumpled envelope addressed to Claire D. Langford. Langford wasn't her last name. Not mine either. I opened it. Inside were printed hotel receipts, all from a resort in Santa Fe, New Mexico, spanning the last 2 years. All charged to Mrs. Claire Langford. Same suite, same weekend she'd told me she was helping her cousin. One of them even listed 2 guests under the reservation. My heart sank. The phone bill followed. I pulled up the family account and traced unknown numbers. One in particular appeared frequently. I dialed it, my hands trembling. A man answered, his voice calm, almost warm. "Hello." I froze. "Yeah, do you know someone named Claire?" Silence. Then he asked, "Who's this?" I said, "Her husband." He said, "Funny. I'm her husband too." I felt the floor drop beneath me. That was the moment my world cracked. I sat on the edge of the bed, heart racing, mouth dry, phone still in my hand. My wife had married another man. Not before me. Not years ago. Not in some annulled memory. Right now. 2 husbands. At the same time. She wasn't just cheating. She was living 2 lives. And that man? The one on the phone? His name was Zayden Langford, a civil engineer from New Mexico who thought he'd been happily married to Claire for 4 years. Turns out he was living the same lie I was. I didn't sleep that night. After Zayden and I hung up, I sat in the living room staring at the front door, waiting for Claire to come back from grocery shopping. A million thoughts rushed through my mind. What to say, whether to confront her, how deep this betrayal really went. When her headlights finally spilled across the driveway, I felt my chest tighten. She walked in like nothing had happened, carrying 2 paper bags and humming under her breath. "Hey, babe," she said with a smile. "You wouldn't believe how packed it was." "Who's Zayden?" I asked quietly. She froze. It wasn't dramatic, not at first. She just paused, eyes darting toward me, then toward the bags. Her expression changed so subtly it was terrifying, like someone flipping a switch to activate a new persona. "What are you talking about?" she asked calmly. "Zayden Langford," I said. "You're married to him. You stayed with him in Santa Fe. I saw the receipts, Claire. I talked to him." Silence. A beat too long. Then she exhaled, slow and deliberate, and set the bags down on the counter. She didn't deny it. She didn't cry. She didn't beg for forgiveness. Instead, she pulled out a chair and sat down like we were about to discuss the weather. "Okay," she said. "I guess you know now." Just like that. The woman I thought I knew, my wife, had just admitted to bigamy like she was confessing to forgetting to water the plants. "Why?" I asked. My voice cracked. "How could you do this?" Her eyes, those cold, distant eyes, locked with mine. "Because I could," she said. "Because it made sense at the time." She told me everything. She met Zayden first. They married in a courthouse in Albuquerque. He was always traveling for work, on the road 5 days a week. She got lonely. Then she met me on that highway outside Cannon City. She said I was easy to fall for. She claimed she loved us both. "It wasn't supposed to last," she said. "You were supposed to be a phase. But then I saw how much you adored me, and I didn't want to lose either of you." My fists clenched, knuckles white. "You lied to both of us. For years." She nodded. "I did. No te has. No dimos." That night, I packed a bag and drove to a cheap motel on the edge of town. I couldn't look at her. Couldn't even be in the same house. She didn't stop me. She just stood in the doorway and watched me leave. The next day, I called Zayden again. We met in person. A quiet little diner halfway between Cannon City and Santa Fe. He looked like me. Not in appearance, but in posture. In the hollow way his eyes stared at the table, and the silent rage boiling just beneath his skin. "She played us," he said. "She used both of us." We traded stories for hours. Dates. Lies. Little inconsistencies we'd each ignored. She had an entire second identity. 2 bank accounts. 2 phones. Even 2 wedding rings, different styles, worn on different fingers depending on who she was with. "She told me she couldn't have kids," Zayden said. "She told me she was trying to get pregnant," I replied. That's when something changed in him. Zayden went quiet. His jaw clenched. His hand trembled around his coffee cup. There was something darker behind his eyes now. Something more dangerous than sadness or heartbreak. "I should have seen it sooner," he muttered. "I should have stopped her." "Stopped her?" I asked. "From what?" He didn't answer. Later that night, I returned home to grab more clothes. Claire was gone. No note. No message. Just her phone left behind on the kitchen table, still open to a half-typed message draft. "Zayden knows. I think he's going to." It stopped there. I should have gone to the police. I should have reported her missing. But I didn't. Not yet. I was angry. Too angry. And part of me, God help me, thought she deserved whatever was coming. 2 days later, the police did show up, but not to find her. They found Zayden in an abandoned cabin near the Colorado border. Blood on the walls. Blood in the sink. A knife buried in the floorboards. But no body. Claire was gone. The cabin was a skeleton of a home tucked deep in the pines, surrounded by silence and cold earth. It belonged to Zayden's uncle, an old hunting property long abandoned. The perfect place to disappear, or to make someone else disappear. That's where the sheriff found him, Zayden, sitting on the floor, his shirt soaked with blood, his hands trembling. The responding officer said he looked catatonic, pale, distant. There was no struggle, no attempt to flee. He just sat there like a man already buried in his own mind. The only thing missing was Claire. They took him in, of course, arrested him on suspicion of homicide. But without a body, charges wouldn't stick. Zayden wasn't talking. Not to the police. Not even to me. And then, something worse happened. Claire's car was found 2 counties over, parked behind a burned-out gas station off Highway 350. Inside was her purse, her driver's license, and, chillingly, one of her wedding rings. The same ring she wore with me. The detective told me in confidence, "This doesn't feel like a disappearance. This feels like a message." I kept going over her final message draft again and again. Zayden knows. I think he's going to. To what? Hurt her? Kill her? Tell me everything? I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. And I couldn't shake the feeling that none of this was over. Then, 3 nights after the car was discovered, I got a knock on my door. It was her. Claire. She looked like death. Hair matted, jacket torn, face scratched and bruised. She stumbled into my arms like a wounded animal. I barely caught her before she collapsed on the living room floor. "Where have you been?" I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady. "Everyone thinks you're dead." "I ran." She gasped, her lips dry and cracked. "I ran after Zayden lost control." She told me what happened. After Zayden found out about me, he lured her to the cabin, told her they needed to talk, alone, without phones, without interference. She went, stupidly, naively, thinking she could calm him down. He was her first husband, after all. She thought she knew him. But Zayden wasn't Zayden anymore. Something inside him had snapped. He screamed, threw things, accused her of ruining his life, of turning him into a joke. He said I made him small, she whispered, eyes wide with trauma. Said he'd spent years being a fool for a woman who didn't love him. I didn't speak. I just let her go on. Claire said she tried to leave, but Zayden blocked the door. He pulled out a hunting knife from a drawer, one she remembered from years ago when they'd gone there to get away early in their marriage. He told me I had to choose, she said. One husband had to die, either you or him. I stared at her, my stomach turning. So what did you do? I fought, she said. I grabbed the lamp, hit him, ran. I don't even remember how I made it out. The police didn't believe her at first. The bruises helped her story, but the blood at the cabin was his, not hers. And there were no signs of a second person, no tire tracks, no DNA, no struggle. That night, she stayed in our house again. I should have told her to leave. Should have told her to go straight to the police or stay with her family. But I didn't. I let her sleep in the guest room. Part of me still didn't know what to believe. Then came the worst moment of all. At 2:34 a.m., I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was a voicemail from Zayden's number. My hand shook as I pressed play. You think she's innocent? You think she's telling you everything? Check the fireplace. Ask her about Kansas City. She played me. She's playing you, just like she played us both. The message cut out. I ran to the living room, flicked on the lights, and looked at Claire asleep on the couch. She was curled up like a child, one hand tucked beneath her chin. She looked peaceful. I hated that I still thought she looked beautiful. I walked over to the fireplace. I hadn't used it in weeks, but something in the ashes caught my eye. Half-burned papers, a small black book with a scorched leather cover. I grabbed it with tongs and brought it into the light. It was a diary. Claire's. The entries weren't long, but they were damning. Page after page of dates, thoughts, lies. A record of both marriages. How she'd manipulated Zayden. How she tested how far he'd go for her. The Kansas City trip Zayden mentioned, that's where she'd told him about me. Months ago, long before I ever learned his name. She had deliberately set things in motion, just to see what would happen. The diary ended abruptly. If Zayden does it, I'll blame him. If he doesn't, I'll leave him. Either way, I'll be free. I stood there, clutching the book, staring at the woman who had made me love her, who had made both of us fall for her lies. She was never afraid of Zayden. She had manipulated both of us like chess pieces in her private. There's a kind of madness that comes from betrayal, not just being lied to, but realizing the person you loved most wanted a lie. Clara played both Zayden and me like characters in a novel she was writing in her head. Each page turned with a smile and a lie. The diary in my hand was proof. But proof of what exactly? That she manipulated us? Yes. That she made Zayden jealous, maybe even violent? Absolutely. But did she kill him? That's what kept me awake as I stood alone in the kitchen that night, the only light coming from above the stove. Claire was still asleep on the couch. I kept looking at her through the doorway, like she was some haunting relic of a past I hadn't lived, just stumbled into. Her bruises were real. The fear in her eyes, the blood on her jacket, all of it matched her story. But the diary told another story. A story where she was in control, calculating, ruthless. I picked up the phone. The detective in charge, Sergeant Lila Forster, had given me her number days ago, just in case. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the call button. Then Claire stirred. "Where are you?" she mumbled from the couch, sitting up with a sleepy groan. "Come back to bed." There was again that gentle, seductive tone, the same voice that once made me believe in starting over. I didn't respond. I put the diary in my safe, and I made a plan. The next day, I told Claire we should get away for a few days. Clear our heads. Somewhere quiet, like that lake house I'd inherited from my grandfather. She smiled, actually smiled, and agreed. I packed her things in mine, but I also packed something else, a hidden camera and a tiny recorder. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I just give the diary to the police? Because I needed to know. I needed her to tell me the truth. Not a version. Not a half story. I wanted to hear it from her mouth. I needed to hear her say it, so there would be no more doubt. We arrived at the lake house that evening. It was small, quiet, just 2 rooms, and the woods out back stretched for miles. The kind of place where no one could hear you scream or confess. Claire made dinner, acting like nothing had happened, like she was still the same woman I'd married. We ate by candlelight. She drank wine. I sipped water. Then she asked me the question that nearly broke me. "Do you still love me?" Not because I didn't have an answer, but because the answer terrified me. "I loved who I thought you were," I said. She nodded. "That's fair." Then she added, "But I never lied about what I felt for you." That was the first real crack in her mask. We sat in silence after that. I told her I was tired, and I went into the bedroom. I hit record on the device I'd hidden in my backpack. 15 minutes later, she followed me in. She slid under the blanket beside me and whispered, "Can I ask you something?" I said nothing. She continued, "If I told you Zayden was dead, would you protect me?" My blood turned to ice. I didn't move. She laid her head on my chest. "He threatened me. He told me he'd kill me. He came at me with a knife." She paused and said it. "I didn't mean to kill him, but I did." She breathed in slowly. "I buried him in the woods behind the cabin. I panicked. I kept my breathing steady, pretended to fall asleep. But inside, my heart was pounding like a war drum. The recorder was still going. The next morning, I drove her into town under the pretense of picking up groceries. We stopped at a gas station. While she was inside, I called Sergeant Forster. "I have something you need to hear," I told her, "and I can take you to where he's buried." It didn't take long after that. The police searched the woods behind Zayden's uncle's cabin. They found a shallow grave. Inside was a body with Zayden's dental records, knife wounds in his chest, a defensive wound on his forearm. It was over, or so I thought. Claire was arrested at our lake house 2 days later. They read her rights. She didn't say a word, just looked at me as they placed the cuffs on her wrists. "I knew you'd turn me in," she said. "You always liked the truth too much." I said nothing. What was left to say? I watched her disappear into the back of the police car, and I felt nothing. No relief. No sadness. Just the weight of knowing that I had finally escaped her web. Or so I hoped. They say closure is a myth, a sweet idea we chase to make sense of the mess. I used to believe in it. After Claire's arrest, I thought I had it. She was behind bars, Zayden's body had been found, and the story, our story, was finally over. But the truth has a habit of hanging around. 2 months after the trial started, I received a letter. It arrived in a plain envelope with no return address. The writing on the front was hers, elegant, sharp, unmistakable. I held it for a full hour before I opened it. Inside was a single page, written in blue ink. "No greetings. No apologies. Just this. You never really understood, did you? I didn't kill Zayden out of fear. I didn't kill him because he was jealous. I killed him because he was going to take you. And you? You were always the prize. I dropped the letter. My mind went blank. Claire didn't kill Zayden in a panic. She killed him on purpose. I sat in my living room, the afternoon sun leaking in through the windows, the letter still trembling in my hand. How long had she been planning it? Did she marry me just to push Zayden over the edge? Did she know exactly what she was doing when she brought us all together? She wasn't just playing with our hearts. She was playing with our lives. The worst part? She won. Because now, even with her gone, I couldn't escape her. Claire's trial took a dark turn after that. The letter wasn't admissible. It hadn't gone through legal channels. But the police found other evidence. Messages on her burner phone. Deleted photos on Zayden's tablet. A journal entry where she fantasized about starting fresh after the obstacle was removed. The obstacle was Zayden. She called it necessary pain. And me? I was the reward. But I didn't feel like a reward. I felt like the dumbest man alive. I stood beside her during vows. I kissed her knowing only half her story. I opened my home, my heart, and my future, and she filled it with lies. The trial ended on a gray Friday afternoon. Claire was sentenced to 25 years without the possibility of parole. When the verdict was read, she showed no emotion. She just looked at me. No chat, no digret. Just a faint smile. Like she'd gotten exactly what she wanted all along, to be remembered. It took me a while to move on. I sold a house. I deleted every photo of us. I got a dog. I started seeing a therapist, someone I could talk to without judgment. Someone who didn't say, "I told you so," even though half my friends wanted to. I began to write. Not for the world, just for myself. Pages filled with things I should have seen. Feelings I buried. The stupid hope that love would somehow fix broken people. But love can't fix a monster. One night, I visited Zayden's grave. It was raining. The cemetery was quiet. I stood there for a long time, unsure of what to say. He and I had been strangers in the same war, pawns on our board. I placed a single white rose on the stone, and I whispered, "I'm sorry," not just for doubting him, but for surviving him. Sometimes I still dream about Claire. Not the Claire from our wedding. Not the one who wore white and cried during her vows. I dream about the one who smiled when the cuffs went on. The one who watched it all fall apart like it was the ending she wanted. In the dream, she always says the same thing. "I didn't lie to you. I just didn't tell you everything." That's the end.